This channel is for educational purposes only. Please do your own due diligence before making any investment decisions. This is Joe Rabil with Invest Like a Pro. So today's video is going to focus on the 1, 2, 3. I'm actually going to concentrate on the 2 and understanding what it means, why there are times when I really feel like it's the entry that you want to use and not wait for the 3. But we're going to go through the basic sequence, and I'm going to show you a little trick that I like to use that can help me when I'm trying to decide whether to enter off of the 2. So let's go ahead and get going here. I've got the TAN up to start. Now, there were a couple ETFs that I had been watching and talking about with my subscribers, and one was this TAN. All right, and then another one is a URA that I'm going to talk about next. And I want to show you the differences in the way that they played out and what where it started to show that the URA was actually the place to be and the TAN was just not going to make it right now. So let's just start with our weekly chart. And we can look at this. In fact, let's go ahead and look at this. And I'm gonna go ahead and expand this. So here's our weekly chart. Now I've got the green line overlaid. That's the 18-month line. All right, but I want to focus more on the zigzag, because what I want to do is make sure you understand, and all of this is in my course. I go into this in a lot of detail in what I'm going to describe to you very briefly. But we make a lower high here and a lower low. Now, once we do that, we can draw in a trend line. All right, and you can draw this trend line in like that. And so that's pretty much the way I would draw the trend line on this chart. If I'm looking at this peak here and I'm saying, where would I put a trend line in? All right, now the other thing that I would suggest is that even if you have this trend line broken, if you get a peak here, a peak here, a peak here, you can draw in this trend line as well. And what I have noticed a lot of times is that the break of this trend line that's been tested 3 times will often coincide with the 1, 2, 3 sequence. But I want to focus in on our original 1, 2, 3. We break the trend line. This is the 1. All right. Now, once this turns down, starts to test this low, we now are forming a 2. We haven't actually formed the 2 until this can turn back to the upside. But once we get a test that I would say is about 1/3 of the way down of this move, so once we retrace about 1/3, I like it to be a half, but you know, like 1/3 can usually do the trick. Then we have formed what I call a transitional phase. And transition is when we've broken the trend line. So we were in a downtrend. We've broken the trend line, and now we've come back to test, and now we're basically no longer in a downtrend, but we're not in an uptrend. So I call this transition. All right, you're sitting in a transitional phase, and I can tell you, go back through your old trades. Go and look at how many trades you did where the higher time frame was in transition and you were taking losses. All right, remember, just keep an eye on. Remember what I just said there, all right? I'm going to repeat it. So if you're in a transitional phase, go back and look at the stocks that were in a transitional phase on the higher time frame, all right? And see how many times you were taking losses in these. Because what you're trying to do, if you're buying in the transitional phase, you're trying to pre-guess a trend change. You're trying to pre-guess a trend shift, all right? And in general, I don't really like to do that usually. I need other evidence to suggest that it's worth doing. Now, there's a couple things that we can look at, and I'll actually show you that when I get to the URA. But look at what this is. So this breaks a trend line, and then it comes down. And then if you notice, we never make the 3. We never get to the 3 to the upside. We never really shift the trend. And now it's actually come down and it's testing these lows. It's almost breaking these lows. It's almost to the point of where you have a failed 1, 2, 3. And if this goes to let's say this drops to 50, then you actually want to shift the trend line like that. Okay, you're going to actually alter the trend line because now this low is no longer the low of the move. So you can, once you make a new low in the move, you can now adjust the trend line. All right. Now, I go through a lot of detail in the course. I'm kind of giving you a much briefer version of this. But for those of you who have taken the course, I think this will really help. So we've got this transitional phase. Now, one thing I would suggest is keeping an eye on a couple things. Number one, how we're reacting on the monthly chart. And I'm going to shift this back. So what we want to find on the monthly is what's going on with MACD, what's going on with ADX. We want to do the same thing on the weekly chart, and we actually want to do the same thing on the daily. Because when we're sitting in this zone going sideways, I'm trying to look for answers on an edge. Can I pre-guess that this thing wants to get going to the upside? Now, I can go back to November of last year. All right, and through this whole, so we had a big drop and then we rallied back up. There's no sign on even a daily chart. Look at the ADX. There's just nothing going on here. This is moving up and it's pulling back. There's no real sign of strength that is telling me I can jump the gun and get in on the 2 here. All right, I need evidence at least on the daily chart at a minimum. It's probably not going to show up on the weekly. But one thing I would like to at least have is have the green DI be above and holding. And if you notice, that's not really what happened here. It rallied up and then it came back down, rallied up, came back down. And then red's actually been on top for this whole period here. So once I'm seeing that, I'm knowing that it's just not that, it doesn't look like it's bubbling and ready to go. It's not imminent. All right, so these are little keys that I think will help you. The other thing is just recognizing whether the MACD is holding the 0 line or not. I mean, pretty much back in February, we knew this was showing more weakness. We were going to need a little bit more. We were going to need some strength, a break to the upside, and then a move back up. And again, that should show up in the strength on this side. All right, now, there is a little cheat that I like to do, and that is we go back to this chart. And we want to look at the RSI signals. All right. So if I'm in a 2, especially if this is flat, I don't really like it as much if this is declining. But if it's starting to flatten out, I kind of like to look and see, okay, am I getting an RSI signal? And for those of you who haven't, go back through my old videos. I talk about these 2 RSIs. There's a 20 RSI and a 5 RSI in gray. And what I'm looking for is when the red line crosses above 50. And then while this gray line comes down under 50, the red line holds above. And then we go and we look at the pivot on the price. We need the price to actually make a pivot low. If we get that, then we have an RSI signal, an RSI buy signal. Well, if you look at this, there are no RSI. I can look back and say, I can guarantee you there just has not been one. This was the one time. All right, let's look at this right here. Right here was the only time you could have considered it an RSI signal. It's the only one. Every other time the red came down, overran 50, overran 50. You just didn't have a good signal. Now, this to me didn't retrace enough, but I was watching this. I was definitely watching this. It just didn't, it didn't even make the 1/3 retracement. So it's a little tough. It was a little quick. We really hadn't even started in the transitional phase. This really hadn't really turned down. But from that point on, we're looking for an RSI signal. It just never took place. Now, the other thing that I like to look at is when the monthly MACD actually shows reverse divergence. So if price makes a new low here and the MACD is here, and then we rally up, the moment this is consolidating, I'm waiting for this to make a new low. Well, that didn't happen until back here. You see what I mean? So now I've got reverse divergence develop where this is making a lower high and this is making a higher low, and this is making a lower low. And this is a low ADX. Now I've got the monthly chart telling me we got to go looking for some signs of improvement. Well, it never happened. None of that ever happened, and then we just kept drifting lower. So let's just look at a different chart. Look at the URA. Now, I'm going to show you real quick. Here's the trend line, and here's the transitional level, the 3 up here. Okay, now we had the same problem developing where we weren't getting RSI signals here until right about here, right in June. It was actually the start of July. So that was the first time, and if you notice, we were trying to get back above the 18-month and it was starting to flatten out. But we had this resistance level here, here, here. But when I see an RSI signal like that, I might get intrigued. Now, let's just look at what was going on. If we go and look at what's taking place, this was back in July. So this was back in June. Notice the strength. This was the first time we got actually green to get the move above 25. Okay. Now, it wasn't powerful. It wasn't crazy powerful. It wasn't really dominant, but that was the first sign of real life. And then if you notice this, look at the difference here. You see how the green was staying above even through this pullback? So that's this RSI signal here is the same thing as this one here. Notice how we were coming back to the 18 and the 40. Notice how green DI was holding above. See what I mean? So I'm getting, and look at what happened. We had on this pullback, we had reverse divergence taking place. So right as we got into April is when we wanted to start taking this a lot more seriously. So here's April. Now we want to start looking for signals because we had a reverse divergence on this time frame. Now we want to start looking for, okay, we're getting some buyers to show up. Now on the pullback, can this hold? And we get a pinch play. We get green holding above red. And we get our RS signal for the first time in about a year. All right. So use all these to your advantage. And if you understand you're in transition here, you can be on the lookout to get in on the 2, but it might take some time. I mean, I think a lot of people believe you're going to get a 2 and then it's just going to go like that. Well, that's not really the case, especially if you're prepping for a significant move to the upside. A lot of times the 2, it'll sit in a 2 phase for a while. It's a transitional phase that takes a while. And you want to be on the lookout for it. And as long as you understand what's going on here, I think it can really add to your advantage. We're trying to work through the 18-month. We're trying to get this MACD on the monthly to start agree. We're trying to get MACD to improve on the weekly. We're trying to get the green DI above and holding on a weekly chart. And we want to show some signs of life on the daily ADX. All right. Use all this to your advantage. I think it'll really help you in understanding the 1, 2, 3.